for joining us for this episode of Inside Town Hall. I'm your host, Madeline Shields. Joining us on the program is City Councilor Marshall Selberg and his guest, Susie O'Mara, the interim CEO of the Great Plains Zoo and Delbridge Museum. And we have Director of Parks and Recreation, Don Kearney. Thanks for joining us. There are a lot of families who are excited. It's summertime. They're ready to get out. They've been sheltering in place and quarantining. What can we expect to have them be doing now that they can get out of the house?
Well, thank you, Madeline, and thank you to Don and Susie for being here. Yeah. Obviously, trying times indeed, and interesting times in our city and our country. What we're trying to do as a council and a community is, try to get back to normal, whatever normal is. And I think we're a long ways from there, but we're slowly taking steps in that direction. So I thought today it would be a good opportunity to talk about programs that are coming up for the summer in Sioux Falls, giving people a way to get introduced back into the community and hopefully get involved and get their children doing. Of course, we've talked about the pools that are not going to be open. Well, that's unfortunate for a lot of reasons that happen, but there are a lot of things still out there for the youngsters to do and for others to do too. So today we're going to cover some of that. And I think step by step and slowly we're going to get back at it.
Mm-hmm. What have you been seeing already? You were with the Great Plains Zoo and Delbridge Museum. Explain, have you seen more and more people coming to the zoo?
We have. They're so excited to be out, to be able to have some normalcy in their lives. So we're seeing great attendance, people coming through, but they're really respecting social distancing and some of the guidelines that we've put in place. But it is fun to see the attendance grow and grow each day.
Can you tell us a little bit, what can people expect when they come in?
Right.
Is there sanitizing stations? What do you ask them to do?
We have a lot of different markers. We have different queuing lines to make sure as you enter, because that seems to be more of a congested area, to make sure that we're keeping people at a safe distance. We've added different ways to be able to quickly access our gates, whether members can walk right up to the gate versus and they can bypass the window. We've also put into place online ticketing so that they can purchase their ticket before they get there. So keeping people distant in their where there are areas for lines. Then as you come in, we have a lot of different signage and really those social distance markers, as well as increased hand sanitation stations all throughout the zoo with those marked as well with signage. And we have just really we've increased our sanitation of whether high touch point areas. Our bears, the windows, they're a high area that people will touch. Also our benches. So we have a high rotating area of keeping things clean and sanitized for.
Okay. And Don Kearney is the Director of the Parks and Recreation here in Sioux Falls. Unfortunately, like Councilor Selberg said, the pools are not open, but there are plenty of other things for families to do.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we just recently received council support for was working on a free or reduced program that would allow those families that would typically get into the pools with free or reduced admission and pool passes, and actually extended that concept to the zoo and the Washington Pavilion. So we worked with Susie at the zoo and Darrin Smith at the Washington Pavilion to put a program together so that those families that qualified for typically for a summer pass would also now be able to qualify for being able to go to the zoo and the Washington Pavilion without a cost. And so we felt those were the families that were affected the most by the outdoor pools being closed. And so really excited about that program. And the nice thing about it is that if you go to the zoo or go to the pavilion, all you really need to do is stop at one of those and you'll get a pass that'll be good at both facilities, so you don't have to stop twice and apply twice. And that'll be good throughout the entire summer through August 31st. And so if people want to take advantage of that pass, they just need to stop by either one of those facilities.
And I think there's also what's it called, Freedom Pass too, for the transit system too. So not only can you get in for free, but you can also get there for free if you qualify, correct?
I believe that's correct. Right. Yes.
Sure, and that's through Sioux Area Metro for the buses, for the families to get on the bus, or at least children. I think it's through 18, and they can ride the bus. They don't have to go and fill out an application in a different location. They can come directly to the zoo or directly to the Washington Pavilion. What kind of documents do they need to bring with them?
Sure, yeah, they can come to either of our locations where we work together so that we can pass that information back and forth. And the documentation is either a school lunch letter, their EBT or SNAP card, or Medicaid card is the documentation, and being a Sioux Falls resident.
Okay.
I think the pass is valid through the end of August.
End of August, correct.
Yep.
Okay. Talk a little bit about what's going on at the parks and the bike trails, and how are people doing in terms of social distancing and keeping respectful to other people's personal spaces.
Yeah, well, one of the things we certainly saw when the weather got nice, people were out in our parks and on our trails at really probably what I would say is record levels. There wasn't a whole lot they could do. A lot of the businesses were closed, or at least partially closed, and to be able to have the park system available for the general public was a great asset for us to be able to have, and people used them at, like I said, like at a really high level. And so I think initially it was not as good as what you'd ideally like to see, but I think the more we put up signage, the greater awareness about what COVID was and how serious it was. What I saw is that a lot more people were practicing social distancing and really doing a good job of respecting other people's space. We've got signs out across the trail system in our city parks all over that really encourage and remind people to social distance. And so we're really excited about that. And again, the amount of use that the parks received during this COVID transition and this epidemic was really something that we've never seen before.
Yeah, I think kind of the key to all, and you touched on that, is that even though we've kind of taken the restrictions off as a city and it ties in with the bike path and everything else, I think the important thing is for people to do what they're comfortable with. They have the freedom to kind of do what they want and take part in some of these things, but if they're still not comfortable and feel like they need to stay home, fine. If they do go out, still distance, but I think personal responsibility on things like this is really a key to this whole program. So while we've taken the restraints off, we will hope everybody continues to monitor and self-police and kind of do this kind of thing so we don't go back to square one sometime in a month or two. We were hoping for, we don't see any kind of a spike with that. So.
Restrooms. This is a big deal for everybody who's around the bike path, and I was grateful to see that there was a porta potty down at on Western where you can get into the river to kayak. The first couple times there wasn't one, and then are there different guidelines that you have now for people using the restroom, whether it's in the zoo or if it's along the bike trail or in the parks?
Yeah, I would say that almost all of our restrooms are open now, including the portable units that we typically will set out as well. One of the things that's changed since this all transpired is there was a lot of concern about being able to transfer the COVID virus through touching other surfaces. And so over time, as the CDC has modified their guidelines, they're realizing that it's probably unlikely for that to happen and not necessarily impossible, but it's not as likely as they thought it was. And so to be able to have those restrooms open now with people using the parks, we've started up leagues as well now for sports league and stuff like that. So it's really important to have those restrooms open. And so those have been open probably for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And with the change in the CDC guidelines, we felt a lot more comfortable with opening those back up.
And you did talk about some of the sports leagues. Can you talk a little bit about, how can you reassure these families and the children who are playing in these sports leagues and the adults? How do they continue to social distance? What's some of your advice when they're out playing, whether it's soccer or, I don't know, softball and baseball now?
Well, I think Don will probably touch on that too, but I think throughout this whole process, I think the city, through every department and administration and council, we've all done our best to try to cover every base as best we can and lay out the precautions and the safeties and the follow the CDC guidelines and that type of thing. So I think we've been pretty thorough on laying out how to best go forward with every different program or sport or whatever we do, and I think that'll continue. So, but as far as exact guidelines or what we're doing, maybe you'd have a little more to say on that. But
yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we did probably in the last 30 to 45 days is starting conversations with those sports leagues, because they were asking about, hey, are we going to be able to let play or not? And so we asked them to put essentially what I would call a COVID-19 management plan, realizing that it's a different day. I mean, we're going to have protocols in place to do the social distancing, to make sure there's sanitation. And so you'll see every one of those leagues have a plan in place. And some of them are also governed by their national association, which also has recommendations for if you're going to conduct play, what does that look like and what are the things that they're going to recommend. And so in addition to the CDC guidelines, we just told every group, whether it be Sioux Empire Baseball, Dakota Alliance Soccer, whatever group there was, we just said we wanted to see your plan. And then we have this group called SOARS, which is a group that helps to provide technical assistance and kind of recommendations on best practices. So they review their plans that they submitted, and ultimately we set those plans back, made some recommendations for how they could even make it stronger. And then ultimately on the 29th of May, we authorized those groups to play as long as they had their plan in place. And so some of the things that you think about when you talk about social distancing, well, limiting the number of people that are in the dugouts, having the umpire stand behind the pitcher instead of the catcher, doing some things like that really tries to minimize the close contact that you typically see in some of these sports. And I'd tell you that the sports associations have done a really good job because they really wanted to play, but they also knew that they needed to put a plan in place that we were going to be supportive of and feel good about. And so far, they've done a really good job.
Okay. We talked about the pools not being open, but Midco Aquatic Center is opening this month. Let's talk a little bit about why that's important and how do you see that working?
Well, I think it's nice we're given another avenue in that. I don't know, again, there's a lot of disappointment with the pool thing, but I think the right decision was made just for everything that had to be done to do it, and we can get into that. But as far as the aquatic center, I mean, they're going to, kind of limit capacity, but open it up as much as possible to give another avenue for folks to get out there as far as some of the things with that program too. I don't know if you want to get into that. But.
Sure, yeah. The Midco Aquatic Center, we did open the 50-meter pool this week. And so today was the first day, June 8th, where we wanted to have kind of a gradual opening. And so we allow people to sign up ahead of time because we can't just have people flood the front entrance. And so people can sign up. And then the other thing people can do too is if they show up and we have lanes available, it will allow them to come in as well. And so bright and early, 5 o'clock in the morning, we had lap swimmers there, just very happy to know that they could actually lap swim. And it's a ritual for a lot of those folks. Some people run, but there's some people that just swim too, and so for them to have that opportunity back has been really precious for those. And then on the 15th, we'll open up the recreation side of things. And like Marshall said, we will limit the number of people that will come in, and then we'll see how that feels. Is it comfortable? Is it not comfortable? And we'll adjust accordingly, both on the 50-meter side and also on the recreation pool side. So we're really excited about it. And the other thing that we've done is we've extended everybody's passes for 120 days because we were shut down for about 90, but then we're kind of on a limited basis now. And so we felt the right thing to do is to extend it for the full 120 days.
And then let's talk a little bit about the spray park. We're just about out of time, but we have the spray park too for folks who can cool off there.
Yeah, and so on the 15th as well, we're going to open the Pioneer Spray Park, which is essentially north on Jessica off of Rice Street. And so we'll be able to have that available. It's a free of charge facility. There's a picnic shelter, there's a restroom there. And so every day from 11 to 8 p.m., that facility will be open and people will be able to use that. Just reminding people though, there isn't supervision there, so continue to use good judgment, personal responsibility, social distance, respect everybody else's space, and but enjoy the facility.
Okay, all right. Well, when we come back, we're going to hear about the Washington Pavilion and how the Denny Sanford Premier Center intends to open its doors. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Inside Town Hall, where we are learning more about how Sioux Falls is slowly opening to the public after the COVID-19 pandemic. And with us is City Councilor Marshall Selberg, and his guests on this segment are Mike Cruson, the General Manager of the Denny Sanford Premier Center, and Darrin Smith, President and CEO of the Washington Pavilion. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Inside Town Hall. Let's talk a little bit about how are your facilities doing, and I know the Washington Pavilion is open and ready for business.
Yeah. We put a reopening task force in place back on May 1, anticipating some of this would be happening slowly but surely. And fortunately, that is what took place. So we feel like we were, positioned well. A lot of planning went into reopening. It's a multi-phase reopening. So phase 1 for us was mid-May, opening our front lobby, our cafe, our box office. And then phase 2 recently at the beginning of this month, was most of the rest of the building. So our museum spaces, the science center, the visual arts center, and so forth. So we'll be in this phase now for the month of June, and then our hope is beginning in July, we'll be able to have larger performances and larger corporate events and so forth.
What are some of the programming that folks can sign up for right now?
Yeah, so the big thing this summer and each summer at the Pavilion is the education camps, classes, workshops. As you might imagine, we were, and we've continued to limit the numbers in each of those classes. So the classes have filled up given the limited capacity, but there's so much demand now, and with what's going on with, the COVID-19 numbers and all that, we're actually able to increase the size of our camps and classes and workshops as we go through the summer. And we've had a lot of people calling to do that with their kids, so they're very comfortable with it, and we're very comfortable with it. We've got a great environment, safe and healthy environment for them. So that's the big thing this summer, along with our museum spaces, particularly the Science Center. That's always a very busy space. Lots of kids and families and parents and grandparents and so forth. So we're off to a good start there too.
Sure, and let's talk a little bit about how the city has extended the Summer Pass program to the Washington Pavilion so that families who have limited resources and are low income, their children are able to take part at the Washington Pavilion.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for kids in the community. We're very excited to be a part of it. I think it's a great idea on the part of the city with the very difficult decision with the swimming pools, that needed to be made really, and it was the right decision. But what do we do for kids in the community, particularly those kids at lower income levels that don't have all the opportunities that others do? So the idea to be able to have free admission, free access to the zoo, as well as the Washington Pavilion of Arts and Science was a great idea, and it's off to a good start as well. We've had people calling ever since the announcement back in May. So this is really the first week for that, welcoming them in. And again, we're excited to be a part of it. They'll have full access to anything that any Pavilion member or anyone paying admission for the day gets access to. So it'd be a great experience for a lot of them, and in many cases for the first time.
That's what I was going to ask, is do you think you're going to see many new faces whose families just did not have the means to be able to go before?
I think so. And the other thing that the Pavilion has done for a long time is we do have our free First Friday program. So every First Friday of every month throughout the year, we do welcome the public in at no cost. We've got some great corporate sponsors. The city's a great supporter of that. But I think these programs will expand the reach even further because, again, not everybody can get down there between 5 and 8 p.m. on a Friday night. So this is every day, all day throughout the summer, weekdays, weekends, whenever. So it's certainly much more accessible, I think, to that group in particular.
Okay. Mike Cruson is the general manager of the Premier Center. Tell us what's going on there, and when are you going to bring the concerts back? That's what I want to know.
I wish it were up to me, but unfortunately, I think the touring industry as a whole is going through some challenges, and I think they're going to wait for quite some time. Unfortunately, most of our shows have been pushed off into 21, so that's continues to be a challenge, but things we continue to work on. We were very fortunate that through our company's relationship and the state's relationship with PBR, that we have them coming in July, and this will be one of the first events in the nation which will have fans. So it's a scalable type thing where we're not going to be at full capacity, even though our ordinances dictate that, but I think everybody's going to err a little bit on the side of caution, and we're going to ease into this. But as I've been telling a lot of people, it's not very often in this industry that you can be a blueprint for other things around the country. And so the eyes of not only our community, but our region, but the industry will be on Sioux Falls to see how we do. So we've been taking extensive protocols, planning, different things like that to ensure a safe experience, and that they can look back and say, well, yeah, we did it right in Sioux Falls, and this is how we're going to move forward around the country.
I think that's a great point. I think that Sioux Falls and South Dakota have done a really good job or kind of setting the example, or, for consumer confidence and getting back at things. Obviously, we want to do it with caution, but I think we've been progressive in that thing, and I think that particular program and what you guys are doing there and with the Pavilion, that's why we wanted to have them in today, just again to show people that we're getting back at it, and we want consumer confidence, and we want to get back on our feet as soon as we can. And programs like this and what you guys are doing are a big part of that, so thank you for that.
Yeah, well, and to go on that one, the confidence, that's one thing that we've been preaching to. We have to gain the confidence of our community as far as what's safe and everything like that. And I think that's going to be a big telling feature, and we can get that information out from this event here that we're taping today to up to the week of the show. These are all the things that we're doing for the consumer safety. And to be able, and we're gonna hit it ad nauseum so that everybody knows what to expect when they do arrive at the Premier Center.
Have you found, don't mean to
No, go ahead.
get
Go
on your
ahead.
turf
No,
and ask
no,
questions.
No, you go ahead.
Some of the concerts and events that have been postponed, have you found that they're working on getting those same folks back and looking at dates to bring them if folks have missed that?
The majority of the shows that have pushed off have postponed as opposed to canceled. We've had 3 or 4 that have just canceled, and I think a lot of those artists were typically in that high risk area, and so I think it's going to be hard for them at some point. They're going to need some major assurances that it's safe to go out for not only the artists themselves, but the crew and everybody like that, because it's just not the artists coming in. They travel with sometimes 50, 75 people, and whether it's a band or different things like that. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and to make sure that everybody's safe, and to make sure whether it's stage hands are tested and different things like that. And the challenge is, again, we're in a good spot here in Sioux Falls, and I tell people that all the time. We have been fortunate. There are a lot of places around the country that aren't as fortunate, and they're buildings that they're talking about, well, my client in 4 to 6 weeks or 8 weeks, we're going to look at reopening. I mean, and that's really eye-opening when we start talking on calls like that. That we're open right now. If we wanted to have this down at the Premier Center right now, we could, and we with guests. So again, we're fortunate, and I think that always needs to be told to the public.
It's interesting because when you have artists that they have that huge entourage that comes with them, all of the instruments and all of the help that they have, that really is no reflection on the facilities here. It's that they have so many people in their own companies that they have to travel with, that it probably is more difficult for those big shows because of the close contact, and you don't know where everybody's been. You don't know if they've been social distancing, and is the Pavilion seeing that very same thing, and it's a smaller scale maybe?
Yeah, and it mirrors a lot of what Mike is talking about. Our big shows typically are Broadway shows. And certainly we'll have concerts, but we'll have concerts with 1,500 to 2,000 seating versus the 8, 10, or 12,000, just different scale. But Broadway shows, that's our bread and butter, and they have pulled the plug on 2020. So they have said, we plan to resume our schedule in January of 2021, but through December. And the reason for that is many of these folks are in New York City. So, they were hit harder than anywhere else on the planet, or pretty close. And they need to rehearse for months before they're comfortable. And then when they go out, they are in buses. They're not doing a lot of flying, they're in buses. So, that's what our next 6 months will look like. But I do want to, pick up on something Mike said. Councilor Selberg is thanking us for doing what we do, but I think we both want to return the favor and say thank you, because in other parts around the country, the buildings are locked down. And, for us, we're both running private organizations, and we got a taste of what being shut down looks like financially, the impact it has on the organization, on the employees. You know, we had a small taste of that for 2 months. I don't want to taste that again. I just want to get back open and do things very safely and in a healthy way, which we know is very important for our own futures, to do it the right way. And we'll make sure that gets done. But boy, I tell you what, some places I just don't know how they're going to make it. Some places aren't going to come back across the country. And it's really sad because you can balance these things and coexist. The city took, I feel, a lot of the appropriate steps early on for public health and safety. You had to. But likewise, they've started balancing that and backing away from those too. And that's really, really important for a lot of people.
I think balancing has been the key term through this
Yeah.
whole thing, is that, you know, you've got the one side, obviously you want to be preventive maintenance as far as the disease, but on the other side, what are the ramifications of shutting things down? And that's been the thing you have to temper as you go. I was at an event last weekend in my hometown in Minnesota, and they are still pretty much shut down. It's different. So having a little bit of leeway and some room to move, I think, is good. But again, it's up to folks to kind of self-govern and police as we go too.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about what are some of the things you're doing to keep people safe. And one thing I wanted to say, if people don't know what the PBR is, it's the Professional Bull Riders.
Correct.
And we'll talk about that event itself so you can promote it a little bit of what it is all about. But what are you taking extra precautions when people come in to the Premier Center?
Yeah, so some of our precautions that we're taking, so all of our staff will be temperature checked, and we're mandatorily have masks and gloves. So for all the staff, whether it's food service or ushers, ticket takers, everything's like that. We're adding additional cleaning staff to wipe down those high touch areas. There will be I call it social responsibility, social consideration, because it's very difficult to social distance if I have 3, 4, 5,000 people in a building. And so I've changed that verbiage a little bit in many of the signs that we're going to put up. So social responsibility, social consideration. Masks will not be mandatory for guests. PBR is handing out masks, I think, to the first 4,000 to 5,000 people that will be in attendance each day. But there will be, designated areas where for queues, for the concessions, for restrooms. I'm taking every other urinal out of order, every other basin out of order in both men's and women's rooms. Different things like that. There'll be sanitation, hand sanitizer stations, about 20 of them around the building. We're trying to go to a mainly digital format with our ticketing, so less touch points, so no paper tickets. Everything will be able to be scanned on your phone. We're going to more prepackaged concessions, so less touch points. Our concessions will look a little bit differently. We'll have plexiglass shields in front of them. There'll be a designated cashier, a designated drink pourer, so there's not going to be any cross-contamination as far as that. We're going to hopefully to mainly cashless transactions, and we're encouraging that. So we'll have doors propped open. For my staff, I've told them it's all hands on deck. So all of my full-time staff, whether they're in accounting or the box office, just different things like that, everybody will be working those events because I have to add additional staff. So I'll have all my doors propped open, and I'll have a greeter out front. Again, encouraging people to use a certain set of doors that are propped open, those type of things. So quite a long list.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it takes a lot of organizing to get those events off the ground. And with the Pavilion, what are you doing that might be different?
Boy, I could just say ditto and probably leave it at that. And Mike and I had frequent conversations during the shutdowns and talking about, hey, it looks like there's light at the end of the tunnel here. We're going to be able to do some things coming up. But yeah, all the same things: employee temperature checks, screening questions. They're sent home if they're over a certain temperature or fever. If they answer, wrong answer some of those questions. Social distancing, social separation throughout the building. Hand sanitizer stations, that's a big thing. That was hard to resource as a material. So a lot of the same things.
All right. Well, you guys, thank you so much for being here. And if you would like more information, you can go to siouxfalls.org to find out your latest news and information that's happening in the city, and check out the PBR at the Sanford Premier Center. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next month.